Good morning, how are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to show you how often ace-high flops hit. And I'm going to do this by using my new Postflop Workbook and also using Flopzilla. And in Flopzilla Pro, there is a tool called the Flop Breakdown tool. I mentioned this in my top 7 features of Flopzilla Pro, but I wanted to show you how to really put this tool to use to answer some real questions and help you understand how often ace-high flops are actually happening when you hold a blocker and also when you don't. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so let's flip over to page number 44 and do this entire page together. So number 1, how often is the flop ace high? We're going to do that one. We're going to do all of these. Number 2, how often is the flop ace high with no other Broadway cards? And 3, how often is the flop ace high, unpaired, and also two-tone? And we're going to answer a few different questions for each of them. So how often does it happen when you have no hole cards, so no blockers to anything? How often does this happen if you have ace king? And how often does this happen if you hold pocket nines instead? So the easiest way to do this is to open up Flopzilla Pro, and there's a little kind of bar charty thing here. If you have a flop in, you're not going to see that little tool. But if you don't have a flop texture in, then this tool will be right here. So you flick this and you're right here into the flop breakdown tool. And this tells you how many flops happen in total. So there are 22,100 different flops. And then what we're going to do is filter down for the ones we're looking for specifically for these questions in the workbook. So the first one we're going to go through again is how often is the flop ace high? And we're going to do this first and foremost with no blockers. But after we set this all up, then we can also factor in our hole cards and then actually see how things are impacted in any way, whether that's a lot or very little. So we'll look at that together. So let's start with this top one and start filling things out. All right, so the way the flop breakdown tool is set up is there are 4 different major columns because these are the 4 major kind of flops you can have. You can have unpaired flops, you can have paired flops where the top card is paired, so in this situation like ace, ace, 4. And then you have paired flops where the bottom card is paired, so for instance ace, 4, 4. And then you have trip flops where every single card is the same, so ace, ace, ace. So in this situation, when we're looking for how often is the flop ace high, we're looking for unpaired flops that are ace high. We don't want paired flops where the top card is paired, right? Because we're not looking for ace, ace, 4. So we're going to get rid of that by unticking it. So we notice that it totally grays out. A paired flop with the bottom card is totally fine. So ace, 4, 4 would fit the bill. It's ace high. There's no qualifier that says that it can't be that. And we don't want trip flops because again, we're not looking for ace, ace, ace. So we got all that set up, and now we just need to say, okay, the flop is going to be ace high, and then everything else underneath it is selected. So you can either leave it as it is right now, because the way that this section is set up is the top row is going to be the top card, and then the middle one is obviously the middle card, and the bottom one is going to be the bottom card. So we care about flops where it is ace high, but we don't care what the second card or the third card is, the middle card or the bottom card. So you can either leave it where it is, which selects all possible textures underneath this, or you can select all of them yourself, totally your call. We don't care about paired flops where the top card is paired. Again, we talked about that. And the paired flop where the bottom is the card is select the ace for the top card. And again, we don't care which card is paired in the bottom sector. So that looks all good. Right down below here, you see that a bunch of different flops are here. And what this is here to do is essentially proof to you and make sure that you set your filters up correctly. So if we just look around here, all these boards are ace high. That's great. We don't see anything where it's ace, ace, anything. That's good. And there are a couple that are paired like this ace, queen, queen, but no problem. That still satisfies the condition. So in order to answer this question right here, we just have to add these 2 values up. So the unpaired flop is going to be ace high 19.11% of the time. Again, no blockers considered right this moment. And the paired flop with the bottom card being paired, that's going to happen 1.3% of the time when it's ace high and the bottom card is whatever. So we can just throw up a calculator real quick, add those 2 things up. 19.1 plus 1.3. 20%. So 20.4, we're just going to round that down to 20, and we're all good right there. Now, the workbook also wants you to say, okay, well, what if you have ace king? What if you have pocket nines? How does that influence things? And this is actually very, very easy. With this tool still up, you can just plug in your two hole cards. So if we have ace king of spades, we notice that that drops down pretty significantly, and that should make sense, right? If we have an ace, it's going to make it more difficult for an ace to pop up on the flop. So we can still leave both of these filters set exactly the way that they were and just start factoring things up and adding things in. So 15.5 plus 1.1 gets us to 16.6. That rounds to 17. Excellent. And if we held pocket nines, okay, so 9 hearts, 9 clubs, do the exact same thing, add those numbers up real quick. And 19.8 plus 1.4 gets us to 21.2, round that to 21, and perfect. And we can go through and pull up the answer key real quick and make sure we're on the right track. So page number 44, question 1, ace high, 20% of the time, yes, 17 when we have ace king, 21 when we have pocket nines. We did everything correct so far. Now let's rock and roll and move on to the second question, which looks at ace high flops with no other Broadway cards. All right, so we can set this up in very much the same way. We're just looking at unpaired flops that are ace high, but with no other Broadway card. And we're still looking at paired flops where the bottom card is paired, so that way we have something like ace 6-6 that will fit the bill. But again, we still don't want the paired flops with the top card. We don't want ace 4, and we don't want ace boards. So the major thing that we have to fix here is just adding a little bit of an extra qualifier down below to these flop values. So because we want no other Broadway cards, we want to make sure that there's not a king, queen, jack, or 10 in the middle card. And then you notice that down below that automatically fixes for the bottom card and shoves that down to an 8 or lower. The middle card is a 9 or lower, and that is satisfied properly. And then for the paired flop with the bottom card, we again don't want that to be a king, queen, jack, or 10, so we can just select the 9 through deuce, and we are good to go there. So if we pull up the calculator real quick and add those two numbers together, again, we're adding that 8% plus this roughly 0.9, gets us to 8.9, and that's going to round up to 9%. Excellent. And again, same thing when we're factoring in for holding blockers. Let's just throw those in over on the right. Oops, sorry, this is with pocket nines in, so let's actually get rid of those for a moment. Then make sure we did this right. So 8.1 plus that, yeah, it's still at 9%, but always make sure you go over here and double check that you don't have the dead cards factored in when you're not looking for them. We know we're looking for ace king next, and that's going to drop things down just like it did in the previous question. So 6.9 plus 0.7 gets us to 7.6. That rounds up to 8. Excellent, and we already did if we had nines, so we know that's going to be 9% as well, and we're good to go there. So, not shocking, when we're removing cards from being possibly included in the filter, right? We're removing the king, the queen, the jack, and the 10, those other Broadway cards, then all of a sudden we notice that there's a pretty big drop-off in how often these kind of flop textures happen compared to the ace-high textures where we didn't have that extra condition, that extra qualifier. This should make a lot of sense, and also noticing the pattern of when we hold a blocker to that specific texture we're looking for, how often that's kind of dropping down, and it can be pretty significant, and obviously it's more significant as there are fewer qualifiers, but still something to keep in mind. Alright, let's do this final one together. So question 3, how often is the flop ace-high, unpaired, and also two-tone? So let's go back in. We're going to get rid of our whole card so I don't make that mistake again. And we're looking for ace-high unpaired. So we're getting rid of the paired flops because we don't want those. Obviously, don't want trip flops for the same reason. We just want these unpaired flops. We want them to be unpaired, yes, and two-tone. So we don't need this qualifier down below. We can select all of the middle cards, all of the bottom cards. Ace-high is still going to be the top card. And we only want two-tone boards, right? So we don't want rainbow boards, we don't want monotone boards, we only want two-tone, which means that there's 2 flush cards on the board. So if we look down below just to check the sample, all of these have a flush draw on them. Excellent, 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 and perfect. There's no qualifier about whether it had to be, the ace had to be the flush card or anything like that, or it didn't have to be that. That's not what we're asking. It just has to be two-tone, and right now it looks like we have all of our conditions satisfied. Excellent. So because we're just adding this left column up together, we notice that that's 11%. Excellent. If we hold ace king, what is the answer? Ace king of spades. Notice that drops down to 9%. And if we hold pocket nines, then what do we got? We have 11%. Perfect. Excellent, and all that looks good to me. And that is how you can use the flop breakdown tool in Flopzilla Pro to start answering questions in a Postflop workbook, and also just to get a better idea on how often common textures arise. And ace-high textures are not the most uncommon thing in the world, even though people sometimes act like they shouldn't come up all that often. And obviously when you have an ace in your hand, it is going to come up less often, so keep that in mind. And just for the record, you can use this to answer lots of different things. You can say, okay, well, how often when I have pocket kings am I going to have to face an ace on the board? And you can start kind of hacking through things that way and start having some fun and start getting some actual answers for this kind of thing, rather than kind of every single time you get to a flop being like, damn it, it's another ace-high flop. Well, how often is that supposed to happen? And having that objective answer in your back pocket is very, very helpful, because if nothing else, it can keep you from going on tilt because yet another bad flop happened for you. So this is the way that you can kind of utilize this stuff off table and start developing a better intuition and understanding on how often things are objectively going to be happening at the table. So if you have any comments or questions, and just for the record, the workbook goes through a lot more than just ace-high flops. There are different high card flops, there are low and medium flops, drawing kind of flops, Broadway flops, and also other things earlier like two tones, monotones, rainbows, and understanding how often these things are actually occurring. So you can do all this stuff on your own, or you can grab the Postflop workbook, jump into it, and start having some fun and really start learning this stuff by doing this off-table stuff in a guided way where the answer key can also let you know, hey, this is the correct answer, or this is not so much the correct answer. If you're interested in learning more about Postflop workbook and picking up your copy today, the ebook is available as well as the paperback on Amazon. You can visit all of that at splitsuit.com/postflop. Check it out, see if it's the right fit for you, and I really hope it helps your off-table study immensely, if nothing else, because it'll be guided and the answers will be right there for you. As always, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.